pistol.
No.
We're going to go with no, short answer. Is marijuana legal in the state of Colorado?
Yes.
The state of Florida has decided that the sale and distribution of marijuana is an illegal activity. Colorado has a different opinion on it. Okay. Liberal, conservative, Western, Southern, who knows why, doesn't matter. Bottom line is different states have different definitions of what is a criminal action. Okay? That's kind of showing you the minutiae. On the larger scale, I don't know of any country in the Western world that doesn't deem it a crime to commit murder. Okay? Even non-Western worlds. Okay? And most civilized countries deem the act of murder to be a criminal act for which an individual should be punished. Now, in some Middle Eastern countries, that act of murder might not carry much of a penalty if it is perceived to be justified for whatever reason.
I mean,
Okay.
it's the
But
same
even-
here.
Right.
They just have looser justifications of what allows it.
Different cultural aspects
Right.
of why it might be wrong or not be wrong. For example, in some Middle Eastern countries, honor killings. Okay? That could be a justification. If a man has kissed your unwedded sister, can you justifiably engage in an honor killing in some Middle Eastern countries? Yes. Can you do that here? No. Okay? A justification that might fly in one country isn't necessarily going to fly in this one. Okay? So that's an example of how what is deemed criminal is very much the decision of the legal of the cultural aspect of the legal system that we're talking about. Whether we're talking about the state of Florida making a decision about marijuana, or a Middle Eastern country making a decision about when a murder of a female is justified. Okay? Hugely broad range of justifications. But what criminal law is ultimately about is a penalty. And a penalty in this form is a loss of freedom. Now, in this country, freedom, we place a high priority on freedom, right? We fought a Revolutionary War about it, freedom from England, okay? Americans place a high priority on independence and freedom. State action means that freedom is being taken away in some context. Whether it is a overnight sleepover at the Alachua County Jail, okay, or whether it's a life sentence at Rayford. The penalty is some type of restriction and loss of freedom. When I say Rayford, you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
State prison. Okay. Most people here know that. If I were to teach this class in Orlando, I wouldn't probably get the same reaction, but my North Florida friends do. Okay. Loss of freedom is what is at issue. And again, how that penalty will be enacted will vary wildly. Again, overnight stint at the county jail to, in Florida, like a life sentence or potentially even, what's the ultimate loss of freedom?
Definitely.
Definitely. Absolutely. Florida is actually slated to begin resuming executions this week, I believe, after a pretty lengthy court battle about the constitutionality of them in Florida. But when we're talking about a criminal action, so the state has an awful lot of power here, don't they? If we as a society place a very, very high priority, high value on independence, we as a society in turn put a pretty high restriction on our government in the sense that if the state is going to take away your freedom, they must prove beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt that you did the act that they claim you did. You must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed murder. For example. It's a high standard, it's a high bar to reach, as it should be. Because if the state can prove that, they have the ability to take away your freedom. Okay? On this end of the spectrum, we have civil law. Civil law is also about wrongdoing. Your term wrongdoing was exactly right. But we as a society believe that there are certain wrongs, certain acts that are wrong, but don't necessarily rise to the level of a criminal action that justifies the loss of your freedom. For example, you bail on your rent. Okay? You don't pay your landlord. You had a contract to pay $500 in rent on a monthly basis, but you didn't pay. What's the consequence for you jilting the landlord, stiffing the landlord? Eviction, right? I'm sorry?
Fines.
You will be held to that contract, right? Yeah. You'll face a financial penalty in that contract. You'll be required to pay under that contract. Okay. Are you going to go to jail for it?
No.
No. You're not going to go to jail for that. But we as a society say, if we're going to have an orderly, civilized society, we can't let people just stiff the landlord, right? Because then who's going to go into the landlord business? How's there going to be affordable housing? Who's going to be able to, consider real estate a solid investment if they know that people can live in it rent-free? And that orderly, the greasing of the economic wheel requires that there be teeth in those laws to ensure that there is a penalty. The penalty being, if we have a contract that you're going to pay me a total of $6,000 in rent over the course of 12 months, that I can rely on my court system to ensure that I'm going to get paid. Okay? The orderly functioning of our economic society. That's where civil law comes into play. The example that I just gave was an eviction, which is essentially a breach of contract. Okay, you have a rental agreement that's a contract. So that's an example of civil law.
Maybe so. What would a slight speeding ticket fall under then? If it's not an arrest and it's just a fine, would that be civil because you only?
I'm going to put a speeding ticket right around there.
Okay.
Okay, maybe here. On this spectrum of things. Because, for example, let me tell you something that's right in the middle. Oh, there are no working pens in here. Assault and battery. You get into a fight at a bar. You punch a guy. The minute you raise your fist back and lean forward, and the guy goes, that's assault. At that moment in time, that person is in fear of physical harm. They're afraid they're going to get hit. That fear, that reasonable fear that they are going to be harmed, is assault. The contact is battery. That's why assault and battery charges usually go hand in hand. Unless you have a sucker punch, in which case I'm going to argue maybe that's just straight battery, but one way or the other. Okay? Assault and battery. Assault and battery, kind of, it's not good, unless it's aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, in which case it's very bad. But a plain old punch in a bar, your regular good old bar fight, it's relatively low on the scale of criminality. Still get you a night at the Alachua County Jail, but get you a sleepover, but ranks relatively low in the totem pole. Notice something interesting about assault and battery. They also have civil consequences. Okay? That's why I put them kind of in the middle. Because if you have a trust fund that's funding those drinks that you're buying that are inebriating you before you get into that bar fight, you've got a nice amount of cash, a good amount of assets. You might very well also find yourself to be the subject of a civil lawsuit because there are assault and battery are also torts. Okay, there can be a civil action for assault and battery. So, the person who hit you, the person you hit, your victim, can file a lawsuit against you seeking financial damages for, the plastic surgery that they had to get because you got a good clip on their jaw and the teeth that you knocked out, dental costs, all that good stuff, okay, to make you pay the amount of time they lost from work because of this injury, emotional trauma, all that. All those things can be the basis for a civil lawsuit against this individual seeking what?
Compensation.
Yeah. That's a horrible dollar sign. Try that again. Gracious me.
Monetary compensation.
This is about money. This is about loss of freedom.
So would civil law be more like individual versus individual?
Exactly.
And the state
Read my
taking a
mind.
criminal case.
She took the words out of my mouth. Civil law is about individual actions against an individual. Now, let me clarify what I mean by the term individual. Individual can mean a business. Okay, it doesn't have to be a person. But a corporation is indeed a legal person for the insofar as the ability to sue and be sued.
So would it be more accurate to say entity against entity?
Sure.
Government's
But whether it's an entity against an entity against a person against an entity, doesn't matter.
Math.
It's all about individual action, seeking money. That's what civil actions are all about, is a financial consequence, a financial penalty. This is different than our loss of freedom penalty, but it is still, I don't like to use the term penalty because it's really more about financial compensation. You're compensating somebody for their dental bills, for their jaw injury. You're compensating them for their loss of time from work, that type of thing. You're compensating the landlord for his lost rent on the building. It's financial compensation. Yes?
How do you get such weird split decisions, like in the case of OJ, where they found him innocent
I
on the legal
can't
side?
believe you brought up OJ.
You
Have
wanted to
were
put
you listening to my old
put
YouTubes?
civil versus criminal, and they get off on criminal, yet you're still sued for millions on the civil and proving that you did something.
Did you
that
listen to my YouTubes from previous semesters? Because I literally took
No.
Wow. No. Y'all have ESP or
But you
something.
really wanted to split civil versus legal, and he won the legal side pretty clearly with just a glove doesn't fit, and then you moved to
Absolutely.
the other. That's not the only thing, but he moved to the other side of, she won the legal, they won the civil suit.
Why that?
So, to talk a little bit about OJ, yes, to put this into context. OJ is a perfect example of how one act, I used assault and battery, but yes, we could use OJ, same concept, can have both criminal and civil consequences, okay? OJ Simpson, charged with murdering his ex-wife and her friend, Ron Goldman. Okay. OJ Simpson was charged by the state of California for the murder of those two individuals. The jury in California found that the state of California had failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that OJ was guilty. They failed to meet that burden, according to the jury. And so, he was found not guilty. He did not go to prison for the alleged acts of murdering his ex-wife and her friend. Within days of that not guilty verdict, the family of Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman filed a civil action claiming that they were entitled to civil compensation for OJ's acts, the wrongful death. Okay, it wasn't a murder action, it was a wrongful death action, because that's what a civil, whether it's for an intentional act, whether for it's a car accident or what have you, it's a wrongful death action. They were seeking financial compensation. They won. Okay, because the standard is different in civil law. In the civil law, it's preponderance of the evidence. It's a legal burden.
Why is that?
Why is that? Okay. The reason why is because, this is just my opinion, twofold. We place as a society a higher value on our individual freedom than we do our money. We'd rather see you go bankrupt than see you go to jail. Okay? Because we place, again, such a high priority on our individual liberty, on our freedom. The other aspect of why the burden is lower on the civil side, actually, I guess this better explains why it's higher on the civil side, is that the state has all the resources in the world. Okay? All the power, literally, police power, enforcement power. Yeah, they have, any state, any government action, they have tremendous resources and power behind them. An individual attorney who is filing a civil action may or may not. I mean, they're doing this on a contingency fee basis. They don't have the same power and resources that the state does.
So does the term reasonable doubt fall off when it goes to civil?
Has no bearing in civil.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah. It is preponderance of the evidence, sometimes clear and convincing evidence, sometimes weight of the evidence. There's a lot of different terminology that's used, but sometimes percentages are attached to it. Just to explain it, like for example, maybe 51% of the evidence needs to be in favor of one particular party when we're talking about preponderance of the evidence, more evidence than not.
Because they had plenty of circumstantial, which was enough to pretty much say that they couldn't prove it.
So there was enough evidence when we're just talking about preponderance of the evidence, when we're talking about more evidence than not, but when we're talking about it being beyond a reasonable doubt, it's a very high standard. That means, do you have reasonable doubt? Yeah, okay, that's not enough. It's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay? Now, why do you think Ron Goldman's and Nicole Simpson's family brought that civil action against OJ?
They were angry.
Yes.
Maybe he had money.
Because he had money. Had OJ been a homeless intruder, I can nearly guarantee you that no civil action would have been filed.
And he also would have been found guilty of murder too.
Maybe he would not have had the team that he had, the legal defense team, had he been a homeless intruder. Would the public defender's office been able to, pull that off? I don't know. He had one heck of a team. Half of whom are dead. One of whom, you do know who one of the lead lawyers, whose dad that is, right? Yes. I blame him for the dawn of reality TV.
I agree.
It started with that Bronco chase.
Yeah.
It was his client. Daughters picked up the mantle. And ex-wife. In any event, OJ had money. That was the basis for why they pursued a civil action. Again, if there's no money, if there's no pot of gold, there's no reason to pursue it. For nearly every single person who is sitting in Rayford right now, I guarantee you that their actions were such that there is a basis for a civil action against them. How many of them do you think actually have civil judgments associated with their criminal actions?
Not five.
Very, very, very few. Insurance doesn't cover things like that. Okay? Very, very few. One quick thing on OJ. Do you know what OJ did? Of course, this is going back to 97, 96. Do you know what, 95. Do you know what OJ did right after the not guilty verdict?
Bought a house in Florida.
Yes!
Yep.
I'm really starting to think, yeah.
Miami or?
Bought a house in Miami.
Yep.
Why? What was the significance of buying a house in Florida? Anybody know?
Can't take it from them.
Homestead exemption.
Yep.
Constitutional protection in the state of Florida means that your primary residence is protected from civil judgments being attached for a civil judgment. So, Ronald Goldman and Nicole Simpson's family have some $50 million verdict. I don't know, some huge multi-million-dollar verdict. Okay. They can go after his Heisman Trophy. They can go after whatever cash he has, art, cars, collectibles, any of those things, but what they could not go